They said the convent walls kept sin out, but what if they were built to keep secrets in? Behind the stone cloisters of medieval Europe, purity wasn't just a vow, it was a sentence. And when a nun broke her vow, punishment came not from heaven, but from the very church that claimed to save her. These were women of prayer, yes, but also prisoners of ritual, silence, and shame. What they endured when accused of sin would blur the line between devotion and cruelty forever. In the medieval imagination, the convent was heaven's fortress on earth, a place where women, cloaked in black and white, shut themselves away from temptation. To outsiders, it was a world of silence and devotion, untouched by corruption. But inside those walls, the truth was far more complicated. From the rolling hills of Yorkshire to the grand stone sanctuaries of Rome, convents were alive not only with hymns and prayer, but with secrets, longing, and rebellion. At dawn, the bell called the sisters from their straw pallets. Their first words of the day were not to each other, but to God. Their movements were measured, their gazes lowered. Caesarius of Arles, writing in the 6th century, called them gems of the church, precious, fragile, and meant to be hidden from the world's wolves. Every detail of their lives was scripted, how they dressed, how they ate, even how they were allowed to think. The enclosure was not just a rule, it was a shield and a prison. But discipline fades where desire persists. By the late 13th century, disorder crept through many houses of faith. So Pope Boniface VIII issued a decree, pericoloso, that commanded every nun in Christendom to remain perpetually cloistered. The message was clear. A nun's body was to be guarded like a relic, her modesty defended at all costs. But decrees are written in fear, and pericoloso revealed one unspoken truth. The church feared what its women might do when unseen. Because behind the veils, temptation whispered louder than prayer. In the 12th century, at Watton Priory in Yorkshire, one young nun fell in love with a lay brother. When her secret was discovered, she was accused of adultery and humiliation followed. Some accounts say she was forced to witness her lover's mutilation, others that she was miraculously forgiven. Either way, her story spread like wildfire, a tale of sin, punishment, and divine mercy tangled together. And by the 16th century, the boundaries between sanctity and scandal had nearly vanished. At Littlemore Priory, the prioress herself broke her vows, bearing a child with the chaplain and misusing church funds for her child's dowry. Nuns rebelled, some were confined, one burned her way to freedom. What began as devotion ended in chaos, the cloister collapsing under the weight of human desire. Even then, the rhythm of convent life went on. Psalms were sung, bread baked, manuscripts copied. But when the doors closed at night, shadows moved in silence. For some, the greatest transgression was not lust, but resistance, the quiet refusal to surrender one's soul to control. But what happened to those who refused to repent, who dared to challenge the sacred order that ruled their lives? That's where the story turns from discipline to dread. Across medieval Europe, whispered tales spoke of hidden chambers beneath the convent floor, places where the disobedient were sent to atone. Some were accused of breaking vows, others of harboring forbidden thoughts. And while not every convent had such dungeons, those that did blurred the line between correction and cruelty. A record from 1304 tells of a nun named Cecilia, taken by night from the Benedictine Priory of Clemensorp. The documents say she was removed, her captors unnamed. 2 years later, at the Cistercian convent of Kirklees, another woman, Elizabeth de Hopton, vanished in nearly the same way. Both cases describe abductions, not escapes. Were they dragged into silence or fleeing it? The church called these acts corrections, but the truth was darker. These women lived in worlds where faith justified fear, where obedience could mean chains. Behind the cloistered walls, secret trials may have decided the fate of those accused of sin, without witness, without mercy. Centuries later, the myth of the convent dungeon would burst into public imagination with the scandalous book Awful Disclosures by Maria Monk. She claimed that within a Canadian convent, nuns were tortured and silenced in underground chambers. Her story spread panic across 19th century America, tales of secret trials, of women erased in the name of purity. The book was later exposed as false, but its power endured. It revealed a truth older than the myth itself. People will always fear what they cannot see behind sacred walls. Even modern historians admit that some convents did have rooms for silence, for reflection, or for punishment. Correctional chambers, where a nun might be confined for weeks, her prayers echoing off cold stone. Not every tale was fantasy. Some were fragments of reality, distorted, but rooted in power, secrecy, and the uneasy bond between holiness and control. There was another punishment, quieter, colder, and meant to wound the spirit more than the flesh. The ritual of hair-shearing. A nun kneels before her sisters, her head bows low, the shears flash in candlelight, and with one slow cut, her hair falls to the floor. In that moment, she is stripped of dignity, identity, and honor. To lose one's hair was to lose one's place in the world. It marked her as fallen, shamed, unworthy. In the medieval world, hair was more than beauty, it was power. For noble women, it was lineage. For brides, it was purity. For nuns, it symbolized devotion. But when used as punishment, it became a weapon, a public erasure. The same blade that once crowned a woman in sanctity could now condemn her in disgrace. There are records of nuns accused of disobedience or desire being forcibly tonsured, not as an act of faith, but as humiliation, their hair taken so that shame could be seen. To the church, it was a lesson. To the woman, it was a sentence that whispered, "You are no longer your own." And yet, even in degradation, the act carried a strange dual meaning. The early church called tonsure the double crown, a mark of divine service. The paradox was clear. The same ritual that could sanctify could also destroy. It depended only on who held the scissors and why. These punishments, both physical and symbolic, were not just about sin, they were about control over the body, the spirit, and the story itself. Convents were not only sanctuaries of prayer, but battlegrounds of obedience and rebellion. Behind the silence lay centuries of women caught between faith and fear, reverence and repression. Their stories remind us that even holiness can hide cruelty, and that beneath vows of purity, there often beats the heart of resistance. For when power builds its walls too high, even devotion begins to look like captivity.